This podcast contains explicit content and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Don't say we didn't warn you.
Hi, and welcome. My name is Madison.
And I'm Hanna.
And you are listening to Who's Knocking?
A true crime podcast.
Welcome, Rouge, Hannah's dog. She is present. She doesn't know she's present. She doesn't know she's on a podcast, but here she is. If you're on YouTube, you can see. If you're not, you're sorely missing out. So please go check it out on YouTube.
You're missing out on a very cute dog. It's trying to lick my face.
Here we are, another episode. It's another fucked up episode. I guess you could probably say that about all of them. Please excuse me. Same with the last episode. I am recovering from the dreaded COVID, so I am a little nasally, and it's my episode today, so there's going to be a lot of it. Yeah, what's new?
Well, update in the true crime world. Am I going to butcher this name? Ghislaine Maxwell? Do you know if that's how you say it?
Who cares?
Yeah. So she finished her trial and was found guilty on 5 out of 6 counts?
5 out of 6.
So that's good. I mean, I think we all agree that she probably was guilty. I actually really want to do an episode or a series of episodes on the whole Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy situation. I don't know if people are interested, so let us know if that's something you might want to hear about. But
I'm interested.
Word on the street, yeah, I think it's super interesting. But word on the street, the streets of Reddit specifically, is that a lot of people are kind of questioning, okay, Ghislaine's taking the fall, but what about all the other extremely powerful people that are not being brought up at all, that were
that
known
is the most interesting. Yeah. Chris was saying
Prince Andrew.
Yeah, Chris was saying today, like he was reading that it was like an unusual case where Prince Andrew would like to put a gag order on the court proceedings. Like, oh gee, I wonder why.
And none of those people seem to be being implicated. And on Reddit, everyone's like, wonder how long it takes for her to commit suicide, aka either be murdered. There's kind of two things that I'm seeing. Actually, I don't want to get too much into it. If you want to hear more, ask me for an episode on this. But yeah, pretty fucked up. I mean, I think she's pretty obviously guilty. But it's interesting that she's kind of the one taking the fall after Epstein committed suicide. Quotes.
We're air quoting aggressively.
Aggressively air quoting. Yeah, I don't really know what happened. My favorite theory that I started reading about was that Epstein is not actually dead and he is like hiding out, which I think is a fun twist. I think it's possible. I mean, there's no way that he committed suicide and that the security camera glitched for 10 minutes and then he was found. Like, there's no way, right? Or maybe.
God knows. I mean,
nobody on Reddit thinks that.
Yeah, no, I don't think that he just like up and committed suicide. No, obviously not.
Right.
So did somebody make him commit suicide? Maybe did somebody?
Right.
Like, there's a lot of possibilities, I think.
That's true. Like, was he going to bring other people down and they had to silence him?
That's absolutely like the biggest reason would be.
Yeah, that's what it kind of seems like if that's what happened. And then with Ghislaine, a lot of people are like, is she gonna make it in jail? What's gonna happen? Is she even like, what's her sentence gonna be? We don't know yet. So
start ratting on people, lady.
I wonder if she will.
That is the tea that we're all here for.
Yeah. I mean, we know, obviously, it's not just you and Jeffrey. But anyway,
we'll see. We'll see if the powers that be allow the takedown. That's the interesting part, right?
Yeah, I think it might just be swept under the rug because people on Reddit are kind of saying she's kind of the one that's going to take the fall for it now.
Yeah,
but
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
She's definitely involved. Like at least one woman I know testified that she was actually involved in molesting her and stuff. So
disgusting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully for another day that will be a thing.
Yeah. Let us know if you want to hear, because there's a lot there, like with her family and then obviously Jeffrey Epstein and so big rabbit hole.
I want that episode and I want you to do it. Okay.
I will.
So today we're going to be talking about a man named Todd Kohlhepp, AKA the Amazon review killer.
Okay.
I
don't know this man.
Yeah, this is a pretty recent story. It's pretty gruesome. It's pretty fucked up. Rating wise, I would give this, it's difficult to say, maybe a 7. I'm gonna go ahead and say a 7.
Okay. Nice respectable 7.
A nice disrespectable 7. I do not respect this man whatsoever. But yeah, it's a 7.
Pretty high.
I think 7 is pretty high, which is why I'm giving it. Okay, and so this story, like, there's a lot to the story, so it's definitely, I'm not taking it in chronological order by any means, and it's just going to be in the way that I think it kind of tells the story the best, and it is going to be told in 2 parts. All right?
Yes.
So here we go. So I guess the beginning of the story takes place in a small town called Chesney, which is in South Carolina. It's just south of the North Carolina border. And in Chesney...
So this is in America?
Yes, this is American.
Okay.
In Chesney, there was a bike shop, and this bike shop was called the Superbike Motorsport. And the shop was owned by Scott Ponder. And it was doing very well. It was a real hub of the community, and a lot of like sport bike guys would spend time there. It was like more than just a shop. It was a hangout, and people would fix up their bikes and, whatever. On November 6th, 2003, a customer and friend to the shop named Noel Lee called up Scott and asked if he could come by to hang out. And Scott said, yeah, for sure. And 7 minutes later, Noel walked into the Superbike motor shop to find a gruesome scene. He went outside to call the police, not knowing if the assailant was still inside. And from that day forward, the crime would be known as the Superbike murders, and it would prove very difficult to solve. What was the scene, you ask? I will tell you. So
it's exactly what I'm asking.
4 people, and I should not be laughing because it's not funny at all. 4 people were found shot dead. They were the bike store owner, Scott Ponder, who was 30 years old, his mother and the bookkeeper, Beverly Guy, and she was 52. One of the shop's mechanics, and his name was Chris Sherbert, and he was 26. And Chris Sherbert was actually a pretty new employee. Excuse me. And then Scott Ponder's very close friend and the service manager of the shop, whose name was Brian Lucas, and he was 30 years old. Okay. So the Superbike shop was a very well-run, successful business. It had recently won an award from Suzuki. I believe it had only been open for about a year. Scott was the owner, and he opened the store, and he started using the internet to sell motorcycles, which was a pretty innovative thing in 2001.
This was 2001. That's very innovative.
The crime was in 2003, but I guess he opened the shop in 2001.
Got it.
And like they did $1 million in sales their first year, which apparently is pretty good for a motorbike shop.
That sounds pretty impressive.
Yeah. So the Superbike shop, as I said, it become like a kind of hangout for bike enthusiasts. And he had one of his best friends, Brian, running things, and his mother was working as the bookkeeper. She was very happy to be working there. She loved to see Scott at work doing what he loved, and she loved getting to spend time with him. Scott and his mother seemed to be very close. She raised him as a single mother, and she was very dedicated to Scott. She basically spent her entire life trying to improve his life. So it was really exciting and I think rewarding for her to not only get to see him thrive doing something that he loved, but also to get to be a part of it. Which makes it even more sad that like 2 members of the same family were killed in the same incident.
Yeah, that's fucked.
So
were they all like, was it they were just shot? Was it like an obvious pattern?
They all were shot. I believe they were all shot in the head, but some of them had a little like more bullets than one. And they were kind of all in different locations. But they were all, it was like a gun that had done this to all of them. Right. So a robbery was quickly ruled out because there was a huge envelope of cash lying in plain sight. It was $10,000. There was $10,000 in cash that Beverly was going to be taking to the bank to deposit that day that was just left untouched.
Why would you just leave that? Like if you're a criminal?
Because you did not go there for that reason.
Yeah.
Is the thing, right? They had one person of interest who was the last customer before the shooting happened had mentioned, who seemed kind of weird, and they made this composite sketch of this person, but nothing ever really came of it.
Okay.
The really shitty part of the investigation that happened super early on was, so Scott was married and his wife was named Melissa. And at the time of the murder, she was pregnant with her first child with Scott. And she says that she remembers getting the call, and it was like horrible and gut-wrenching when she was told that her husband was shot dead, and now she knew he would never meet his child. And she said one of the first thoughts was, okay, well, I need to call Scott's mom and tell him what happened. And they're like, oh, she was also killed. Like,
yeah.
So terrible. So Melissa was obviously questioned as well as like all the other spouses, girlfriends, etc. And they continued to investigate, and they spoke to her many times, including after the birth of her son, who she named Scott after Scott. And one day when she was being interviewed at the station, Melissa changed Scott's diaper and threw it away in the trash, thinking nothing of it. After she left, the police retrieved the diaper and did DNA testing on it. And they determined that actually Scott was not the father of baby Scott, but actually the father of the baby was Brian Lucas, Scott's best friend and one of the victims.
Okay, whoa.
So they brought this information to Melissa, and she very vehemently denied this. And she said, I want a second DNA test. This is not true. And so the test was performed, and they got the same results. And after this, Melissa lawyered up, and she stopped cooperating with the police, and she continued to deny that Brian was the father. But this caused a lot of suspicion towards Melissa, both from the police and from friends and family. And so like her life was super shitty for a while. She had this new baby. She didn't have the father of the baby. Regardless of who the father was, they're both dead.
They're both,
And everyone around her is suspecting her and being like, you cheated on Scott.
And suspecting that she was involved in the murders?
Yeah, I think there was suspicion about her because of that. I don't think they had anything else to suspect her for like doing it, but it's like that's suspicious, and they found it out through the murder investigation. But 18 months later, when they decided to test Beverly's DNA against Scott's baby, they found out they decided to test Beverly's DNA against Scott's DNA. They found out that that was not a match, which didn't make any sense because they're related, until they realized they had made a huge mistake. Somewhere along the way, they mixed up Brian and Scott's DNA.
What the fuck?
So yes, the baby Scott was adult Scott's baby, and somebody at the morgue or wherever mislabeled the samples. And so this huge clout was over her for a year and a half, and she was basically treated like a suspect. And on top of that, Scott's grandmother actually died never knowing the truth, which is terrible. Like I don't know how close Melissa was with this grandmother, but like this poor grandmother didn't know if this was actually her grandson or not. It was so fucked horrible.
Up. And just then, from a tiny DNA mistake.
And, not to mention, like, because of that, they wasted a year and a half being super suspicious of this woman who did nothing wrong. So basically, the investigation was a total shit show, and they did not have any leads, or they didn't figure it out for a really long time. And just to note, because the police sheriff in charge of the investigation, although he was not in charge at the time, he claims that the source of mistake was unknown and that it could have been from the morgue or the crime scene people or whatever. And like basically he's saying we don't know that the police did it, so like they shouldn't get the blame for it. Which fair, I don't know. Depends who made the mistake, but like pretty big mistake.
Yeah.
So they followed many other leads, including a description of I think this is the same person that I was talking about before, but a kind of weird, off-putting man who was in the shop the day of the murders. The person who last saw the guy, he was they claim that he was the last person to see the victims alive. No, the last person who claimed to see the victims alive, described the guy. And they said that he was in the shop asking about motorcycles and that it seemed like he didn't know anything about motorcycles. And the customer described this man as noticeably off-putting.
Interesting.
But again, we still don't know who this person is.
Did they also what was off-putting about him?
His like demeanor and his attitude and like something about his personality. Like it wasn't anything about his looks, but it just a very interesting way to describe somebody as off-putting. I feel like I use that a lot, but yeah, I just, when you find out who it is an off-putting person. Oh. But anyway, they developed a psychological profile of what they thought the killer might be like. And this profile was developed by FBI profiler John Douglas. He's now retired. I don't know if he was retired at the time, but he must have been, because I don't think the FBI was involved. But he said that the shooter was pissed off, that he had sustained aggression through the entire crime, that he would have spoken of displeasure and vocalized it and was essentially at a boiling point. Okay. He thought that the killer would have had a beef with the entire company, not just one person. He says that he has practiced with a gun, that he probably followed the investigation and would have been obsessed with it, and likely would have inserted himself in the investigation to misguide detectives or come across as helpful. He said that his behavior would be back to normal now, and also that it was not a robbery, a la the $10,000.
Right.
And it wasn't until the discovery of another horrible crime many, many years later that things would all come together for the Superbike murders.
Okay.
So we're going to put the Superbike murders in our back pocket, and we're going to go now to 2016.
15 years later. No,
yes.
13.
13 years later. Okay. So now we are going to be speaking about Kayla Brown, age 30, and Charles David Carver, age 32. And they were a couple who seemed to have gone missing in August 2016.
That's scary.
Yes. And so I'll first tell you a little bit about them. Charles was technically still married to his wife, Nikki, but they were separated. They just hadn't finalized. They hadn't had a divorce yet. Okay. And Kayla's family warned her that it could be complicated to get involved with a married man, but the couple pursued their relationship anyway. And at the time, they'd only been dating a pretty short amount of time, but they were already living together. So they were in pretty deep with each other. Yeah. Charles' parents describe him as very loving and generous and funny in a very nerdy type of way. He really liked to laugh and make people smile. And Charles's father describes him as a very gentle soul. So their families started to worry about them after the pair suddenly stopped all communication in August, or it would have been the very end of August. Kayla's mother started to really worry when the property manager of their building found her dog abandoned for days inside the couple's home. She said there was no way Kayla would do this. or do that. So they hadn't heard from them. And so they asked the building manager to go look in their apartment. And they're like, clearly this dog has been here by itself for a number of days. And they're like, okay, that's clearly something is wrong here.
Yeah.
And then things started getting really weird when a friend of Charles's began to get strange Facebook messages from Charles's account. And yeah, in these messages, Charles, air quote, had started asking him for money or drugs, which the friend found super weird because to his knowledge, Charles was not into drugs. And then Charles's Facebook account started posting all these weird updates. Like, I think they were called milestones on Facebook at the time. Maybe they still are, I don't know. And the person claimed that the couple had run off, gotten married, and were expecting a baby, and that they wanted to be left alone. And the first red flag for the family was that this couldn't have happened because Charles was not yet divorced from his ex-wife, so he couldn't have gotten married. And so the family members messaged back and they're like, okay, like, if you want to be left alone, you can be left alone. That's fine. But we just want one phone call because we want to confirm that it's you. We don't believe it's you. Their family had a strong suspicion that it was not them who was writing the messages. And they were correct about this. And they never did get a phone call. So this seemed to confirm the family's worst fears. And they started making other Facebook groups to kind of get the message out there that they were missing and started talking to the police and stuff. But then things got even weirder because whoever was controlling Kayla and Charles's Facebook pages started liking all these pages and making really weird posts, and commenting and engaging with their friends and family who were looking for them. And like, it would post really weird, like stupid pictures being like, if you want to scare your neighbors, like start digging a hole in the backyard at night, like what the hell? Like weird, creepy shit. And then like the friends and family would be like, who are you? Whatever. And they'd be like, don't worry about it. Like, it's like they would say, I have some photos of some of the messages that were going on, but it was just very like evasive, but also like, it seemed like really trolly.
So strange. It's creepy. I mean, it's super creepy because they're missing.
It's extremely creepy.
Yeah, and it's like, who is this?
And so like all these people could do for a long time was be like, who the hell are you? Like, this is not like, what's going on? And it would always, the accounts would be like, don't worry, Kayla's fine. Like, we have a baby now. And that was like obviously super concerning. Mm-hmm. So then somewhere down the line, the investigators were able to access both of the Facebook accounts, which led them to conversations between Kayla and a man named Todd Kohlhepp. And Todd was
When were those? Were those before she vanished?
Yes.
Fuck. Okay.
So Todd was a local realtor who Kayla had been working for, like doing odd jobs, mostly cleaning work on his properties. And the conversation between the two of them was arranging for Kayla and Charles to come and work on Todd's property on August 31st, 2016, which is the day of the last text message that Kayla's mother received from her. Okay. So eventually the police were able to track down the couple's last known location through Kayla's phone signal. And the last ping of Kayla's phone was on the property belonging to Todd Kohlhepp.
Okay.
Who, side note, also turned out to be a known sex offender.
Oh, you don't say.
So
what kind of sex offender was he?
He was a level 3 registered sex offender, meaning level 3 is the highest, the highest rating, most likely to reoffend. And I'll tell you later when I get to that section.
Okay.
What he did to get on there.
God.
So they go to Todd's house. As I said, Kayla had done odd jobs cleaning for Todd. He owned a very large 95-acre property that was mostly woods. And it was in a very small town called Woodruff, which was in the county of Spartanburg in South Carolina. And they got a search warrant for the property and for Todd's vehicle. Okay. So on November 3rd, 2016, this was now 65 days after they believe Kayla and Charles had gone missing.
Okay.
They arrived at Todd's property Todd was responsive. He allowed them in the home. He talked to them. He denied that he did anything to harm Kayla and Charles.
Was he off-putting?
I mean, yeah, he's pretty off-putting. he like seemed pretty chill, and he was like laughing and joking with the police. There's video footage of all this. It's all on body cam. He did say that the two of them were at his property on August 31st, but that they were there for not a very long time, and then they left. Now, while they were questioning Todd, officers were searching his property, and they did end up finding Kayla Brown alive, but not well. So,
okay, go on.
You're gonna get ready to watch that video. In the video, I'll play it for everybody. So the officers found this huge shipping container on the property, and they started to hear knocking coming from it and then screaming. And so they were able to open it, and inside they found Kayla chained to the wall by the neck. And you go
I'm
ahead
scared to watch this
and watch that video. It is fine. Maybe I'm used to it, but it's like not.
Madison's terrible. Like, I've got a video for you to watch.
Sorry.
Okay. Is it going to give me nightmares?
I'm not going to say no.
Okay. So I'll watch it on my phone.
Yeah, it's like a 3-minute video. So
loading.
Go for it. We'll just cut whatever needs to be cut here.
Should we talk while we?
No, I think you should watch it and then we should talk about it.
Okay.
Yes. You pull that one first. All right, let them get ready. Y'all ready? Come on, guys. Back. Watch out. Y'all move. I got it. Watch out. Are you okay? Grab one. Go. Do you have any weapons? Coming through, okay? What's your name? What's your name, man? Lauren. Okay. All right. Just a girl. Just a girl. How are you, honey? This is bolt cutters. This is our best. He's a paramedic. Oh yeah. Okay, we're gonna get you out of there. Okay. Is both feet?
Just one. It's
see.
attached to a chain on
Okay.
the wall,
Okay.
and my neck's attached to the wall up here.
Okay. All right. We're gonna get you out, sweetheart. Okay. You got a handcuff here. I got one's in my car. I got another one's under my car. I didn't have gloves on when I did that, but.
Do you know where your buddy is?
Charlie,
Yes.
he shot him.
He shot him.
Who did?
Todd Kohlhepp shot Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, locked me down here, and I never seen him again.
Okay.
He says he's dead and buried. He says there's several bodies dead and buried out here, and he says that the dogs will be ruined if they go looking because there's red pepper.
We're gonna step you out, sweet. Because there's what?
Red pepper.
Okay.
Tell the dog people that.
He says
No,
there's
just-
pepper everywhere around the car. The car's supposedly in a ravine under the land.
Okay.
Supposedly covered and painted.
John.
Oh my God, that's pretty scary.
Yeah. It's horrifying.
It's kind of cool. Like, it's like, how often does somebody get rescued? Because I feel like in so many cases we talk about people who are victims of kidnapping,
It's
obviously
very
end
rare.
up.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure she did not think that she would be rescued.
Yeah, like I
Why
wonder
would
if she
she?
was resigned to her fate because she
Well-
saw Charlie get shot.
So I'll just say, I
That's
will describe it a little
crazy.
bit in case you can't see it and you weren't able to hear
Yeah,
what
I
she's
guess
saying.
for people who are listening to audio only, you might not have
Yeah, you
heard
might,
it or seen it
I don't know, you might not see it, and then you might not hear clearly what she's saying, but
or see what it is. Like, describe what it is too.
yeah, so the officers, they like weld through or whatever, chop through the
Yeah.
multiple padlocks on the doors of this giant shipping container. And they go through to the very back, and it's just like dark and full of crap everywhere. And they find Kayla chained in multiple places to the shipping container, essentially. And she's like, kind of just sitting there, and she's like just trying to patiently wait for them to like bolt cut or whatever off all the
Right.
chains. And while they're cutting her loose, they say to her, "Where is Charles? Where is your buddy?" And she makes a very clear statement saying, quote, "Todd Kohlhepp shot Charlie Carver 3 times in the chest, wrapped him in a blue tarp, put him in the bucket of the tractor, locked me down here. I've never seen him again. And he says he's dead and buried, but there are several bodies dead and buried out here. He says that dogs would be ruined if they started looking because there's red pepper." And so the officers are like, okay, make a note of that. Like, don't send like dogs out here if they're going to
Don't send the precious dogs.
Yeah. And then there's also some footage. I don't have it. I have some of it, but it's kind of shittier quality of her in the ambulance. So they have her in the ambulance and they're videotaping her, and she's basically describing what happened to her. She's describing what Todd did to her, that he would sexually assault her constantly.
Oh, God.
That
she'd been held for 65 days, you said, right?
65 days, and told her
that's a long time.
Yeah, and told her like that he's like killed a lot of other people. Kayla ends up telling the police that Todd had killed 2 other people on the property, that he bragged about killing a bunch of people in a motorcycle shop a bunch of years back, and also that he had killed a lot of people, and there was like his kill count was in the high 2 digits.
Oh my God.
So the officers that were talking,
I'm petting my dog for comfort.
Yeah. The officers that were talking to Todd in his house at the time were notified of what was going on. And so then they confronted Todd with this information. They said that they found Kayla and they asked him to tell them where Charles is, and Todd refused, and he denied locking Kayla in the shipping container. And they're like, okay. And he requested a lawyer, and they're like, yeah, I think you're going to need one, bud.
Yeah.
So Kayla,
I'm so curious, like why he, well, I guess his motivation for, sorry, my dog's trying to climb onto my lap. Uji, don't do this. She's like, now's the time I need to get on your lap. Like he, I guess, kept Kayla hostage for sexual reasons.
Yeah, I would say that's the main motivation. Kayla told the police that he kept her locked in the shipping container and chained to the wall for the majority of her time there, from August 31st to November 3rd, 65 days. Every so often, he would take her outside for a walk on the property. This was not every day. Kayla also says that every day between 1 and 3 p.m., Todd would remove the chains on her neck and her feet, but keep the chains on her hands. And he would bring her to not the main house, but this other, there was like another like kind of garage,
like a guest house
kind of thing that was 2 floors next to the shipping container.
Mm-hmm.
And he would bring her there, and he would rape and assault her and make her do whatever he wanted sexually. And she said that if she would say no to things, he wouldn't make her do them because he, quote, didn't believe in rape, end quote.
All right.
But he made it very clear to her why she was there, and that if he didn't have a use for her, that he would kill her. So he made it seem like, oh, well, like only if you want to, but like you better want to, because otherwise I'll kill you. Which in his head made it not rape.
Yeah, I mean. Okay.
And then he would feed her and bring her back to the storage container. She was allowed to go to the bathroom once per day, and every other day, he would bring her a pot of water to bathe with. In the shipping container, it was mostly dark, but the only thing Kayla had available within her reach were some crime novels.
Yeah, I saw a pile of books in the footage.
Yeah.
Really? Crime novels?
It's unclear how she would read them because it was like dark all the time.
Right. Yeah. When the police came in, you could tell like the light hit her and she was shocked by it. So sad.
Yeah, it just sounds just horrific. And this, I think, is like, to me, like the scariest part about this whole case is just thinking about being trapped for somewhere for 65 days, not knowing what day would be your last. Like, it's terrifying. So later, Kayla ended up doing a pretty big interview with Dr. Phil. Cool. Kayla says that Todd killed Charles so that he would be able to so that he wouldn't be able to get in the way of his plan to torture her and hold her captive. And she says, like, he specifically thought that killing Charles would, he's quote, he said it was easier to control somebody if you had taken away somebody that they loved, end quote.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Because, I mean, in a fucked up way, because it's like she's going to be way more scared of you.
Because the very interesting thing about it is, like, Kayla had worked for Todd a number of times by herself.
And he'd been normal. Or normal enough.
Yeah, yeah. And this was the
and
first
he's a
time.
fucking realtor. How's this guy, like...
Oh, just wait.
Okay.
And so this time he'd been like, bring somebody. And I think he was hoping that he would bring Charles because he wanted to keep her as a submissive, like, sex person.
Right.
And he knew,
like,
that
indefinitely, maybe.
He thought, and in a way smartly so, like, if she saw him kill somebody that she loved in front of her, rather than just take her and not do that, she would be more submissive to him because it's scarier. And you also are thinking, now I'm alone. Like, and like, how terrifying is that like somebody thought it through that much?
Yeah.
I would never think about that.
It's terrifying for her too, because she's been around him. She's been like, she's spent time with him, and she's probably, like, maybe not trusted him, but she thought, obviously didn't suspect that he would do something like that. And she knows she's on this massive property where she's probably not going to be found.
Yeah. And it's like only through luck that, like, the police, like, first of all, cared enough to do what they did, and, like, were able to get the phone signal. I don't know what happened to her phone. I'm sure Todd took the phone, but it's like the signal had already happened. So
yeah,
that's how
this
he didn't
is one
cover
of those
his tracks.
cases where definitely internet, like, internet footprints made a huge difference, because even the messages on Facebook that they had, because otherwise how would they have found this guy,
and,
right?
And, like, assuming the Facebook messages were Todd, I'm sure it was.
Yeah, what the hell, Todd? You're just fucking messaging people saying me and Kayla had a baby? Like,
yeah, and, like, that's super bait. Like, dude, you're not being stealth at all. What the hell?
Yeah.
Especially knowing that you corresponded on Facebook.
Yeah, obviously police can find your chat history.
So yeah, and there's interesting speculation about those Facebook messages, which we'll hear more about in part 2. Okay. I'm gonna go through everything and then talk about Todd's childhood. And then in the next episode, there's a lot of theories and aftermath and, like, extra things that, like, bring up other things. I don't know. Okay. But that's kind of how I've divided it up. Just decided to. So then in the Dr. Phil interview, Kayla said that Todd was hoping that she would eventually develop a form of Stockholm syndrome and that they could just end up living happy together. She says that he told her that he was going to build a house for them that had a soundproof room where she could live indefinitely, just like as his, like, captive. Like, how fucked up is that? It's just, like, explicitly being like, hopefully you develop Stockholm syndrome and then you just love me and that's it. Like,
she's like, not yet.
And how sad. Like, that's so pathetic.
Well, for him, that's pretty fucked up if you think that you need to do that in order to get, like, a girlfriend.
And I think at the time he had a girlfriend.
Wow.
Like, he was, like, a pretty, like, normal looking guy. He was, like, a little chubby, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So from that point on, they had Todd, the police had Todd, and he wasn't going anywhere. And they did an extensive search of the property, trying to locate the other bodies that Kayla was talking about. So Todd did end up later confessing to the police about 2 other victims that they would later find on November 6th and November 7th. And these were Megan, age 25, and Johnny, age 29. They were married and their last name is Coxey.
Another couple.
And they were also from Spartanburg County. And they had been reported missing on December 22nd, 2015. Megan and Johnny were a married couple, and they were definitely not doing very well in life. Both Johnny and Megan had criminal records. They had been arrested on separate occasions. In December, Johnny was arrested for unauthorized solicitation and giving false information to the police. And Megan was arrested for child neglect.
No, that's not good.
Yeah, they both had pretty long histories of drug and alcohol abuse and panhandling. They had one child together, but that child had been removed from their custody after the child, who was a baby at the time, tested positive for heroin.
Oh, God.
And Megan also had another child from when she had this child when she was 17.
Okay.
But I don't think that child was in her custody either.
Okay.
So they also both had pretty extensive drug and alcohol offenses dating back to 2009. Now, the narrative put out in the media is that Megan and Johnny were drifters with drug problems. And though it does seem to, in large part, be true, they both had families and mothers who loved them. And Megan's mother said that at the time, the couple were not drifting, that they were living with Megan's ailing grandmother and that they were taking care of her. And her mother says that they were also interested in opening up a tattoo parlor and that they would practice on each other and that they were, more hopeful than they were made to sound. And so I just thought I'd add that because I don't know what the exact truth is. I think that their families are obviously going to paint them in a really good light, but regardless, they were victims. They didn't deserve to be murdered the way they were.
For sure. And it doesn't sound like they were necessarily abusing the kids. It was more just they were too busy, like they were too consumed with their own struggles to support the kids, which, that's kind of more the circumstances they were in.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't have anything to do with why they were murdered. So
okay,
whatever.
Interesting. I'm curious to see why they were the selected victims.
So we'll see if your question is answered. But
okay.
So Megan and Johnny, they had both recently gotten out of their little stints in jail, and they were approached by Todd to do some work on his property back in 2015. And they very enthusiastically agreed because they both were jobless and needed cash. So this was a perfect opportunity for them.
Fuck.
So when the pair were reported missing the same month, Todd was questioned by police as it was assumed that his property was one of the last places that they had been seen. And Todd told the officers that they had been there, they had done some work for him, but that he paid them and that they were on their way. And there was no evidence to assume otherwise. And, because of their lifestyles, it did seem logical for the police to assume that they had been, that they'd done the work, they'd taken the cash, and maybe they used it to buy drugs, especially since there was no evidence of foul play. And they just hoped that they would turn up in the next few days, but they never did.
And the families, because they're kind of like these drifters or so assumed, probably the police just believe they, went on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a logical thing to assume at the beginning, but then when they didn't come back and they never were found and they weren't found dead of an overdose anywhere either, then it's like, okay. The families did try to insist that something was wrong because they said if they had run away, why didn't they take anything? It looked like they just had left all their belongings and didn't take them. And if you're going to run away, maybe you take them.
Yeah.
And Megan's mother tried to get the police to track Megan's phone's last location. And she said that she was told that they weren't able to get that information for privacy reasons, even though it was Megan's mother who paid the phone bill. And that's what she tried to argue. So it did seem kind of bullshit, especially now after the fact, when knowing that that's how they found Kayla. And later the police would argue and say, well, we didn't know that Megan had a phone. But then her mother says, well, I told you she had a phone because I asked you to try to find the signal. So there is a bit of a discrepancy. Yeah, there's a bit of a discrepancy there. Yeah. Now, Todd's story now, he denied anything and said that they were there and that he paid them and they left. But now, after he'd been caught and they found Kayla, he changed his story. And Todd said that after hiring Megan and Johnny and bringing them to his property, he says that Johnny pulled a knife on him right away and attempted to rob him. And so Todd shot him in self-defense on December 19th, 2015. And he says he kept...
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Very...
Sounds super believable.
Yeah, super convenient that happened.
And like you didn't mention that before?
Yeah, especially because then he kept Megan hostage in the same container that he kept Kayla in.
He did. I was wondering about that.
He did. But unfortunately for Megan, she did not last nearly as long as Kayla.
But how do they know? Todd admitted it, or
he said it. And I'll tell you why he admitted to all this stuff after. But
okay.
So he kept Megan, that she did not last very long. It was only a week in when Todd got tired of Megan's behavior. She was freaking out and trying to fight him whenever he would go in the container. And the last straw came on the final day when she somehow managed to set a fire to the shipping container.
Wow.
And that's when Todd got fed up and he shot Megan in the back of the head and buried her next to Johnny on December 25th or 26th of 2015.
Huh.
So the interesting thing is, I think you can see just even from this story and what you'll kind of learn from with Kayla too, is that Kayla and Megan both behaved very differently. I think Kayla adapted her behavior in like she started kind of learning from Todd and realized, like, if I play along, he's not going to kill me. He wants me for this reason. So I'm going to go along with him so that he keeps me alive. Whereas Megan was just trying to fight. She was just trying to do everything she could to escape. And Todd did not like that. Clearly, Todd wanted a Kayla type victim.
Yeah, he wanted somebody that was going to play along with his plans, essentially.
Yes. So the police found the bodies of Megan and Johnny buried next to each other. And once the bodies were exhumed, and they also found Charles's body. And once they exhumed all three bodies, they realized that all three bodies were missing their feet.
What the fuck?
And Todd would never explain this beyond the very odd statement, quote, "My mother told me never to play with my food," end quote.
Oh, God.
Which there's no evidence that he ate them or did anything like that, except for him referencing his food.
What the fuck? And if you're going to be a cannibal, are you going to pick the feet? Like, I feel like that's not
all things. Exactly.
Like, no, I don't think there's anything you can,
But it was weird because the coroner, it was Charles's dad that was asking, like, what, like, he was so confused by this and wanted to know, like, how it happened.
It's
like,
so confusing.
Could animals have done this? Like, what? And they were like, no, it was definitely not bites. It was not, they were not.
Fuck.
He said they were not chopped off. He said it was like they were twisted off.
Oh my God.
And then Todd later said that it was the like tractor or like their excavation of the bodies. He said that their feet must have all come off during that process.
I don't know about that.
And then they like went to the people and were like, the people that exhumed the bodies, and were like, could this have somehow happened? They're like, no, absolutely not. And the coroner's like, no, their feet were like twisted off. Like it looked as if like somebody had twisted their feet off, which is, I've never heard of anything like that. Sorry, my mic is coming off here. So that is just
I've never heard of anything.
That's
like
a very odd tidbit that you never, I don't have any explanation as to why this happened. Sorry. But
I'll check Reddit after this.
Yeah, I've like gone on Reddit for this case, and a lot of it is like mostly talking about like the Amazon review part of this, which I'm sorry, but I'll get to next episode. But
okay. It kind of reminds me of the Adam Strong porn reviews.
Yes, it is along those lines.
Yeah.
So the search of Todd's property also uncovered a bunch of weapons, including about 20 various guns in total and a bunch of ammo. And mind you, he's a registered sex offender, so he's not allowed to have any of these. These are not like, these are all illegal.
And he was a registered sex offender. You'll tell me why and when. Okay.
Yes, I'll tell you in this episode.
Okay.
So all of these guns were believed to have been obtained illegally, and Todd would never have made it through a background check as a registered sex offender. So who is Todd? I will tell you about Todd's life.
Who is this fucking guy?
So Todd was born on March 7th, 1971, to parents William Samsel and Regina Tagg. The family settled in South Carolina, but the parents divorced in 1973, 2 years later, when Todd was only 2 years old.
Mhm.
Now, Regina married shortly after the divorce, and Todd took his stepfather's last name, which was Kohlhepp.
Okay.
Todd did not know, he did not do well living with his mother and stepfather. He seemed to have
Shit.
a lot of anger, and it was usually directed towards his stepfather. I mean, it was directed at his mother, but it was about his stepfather.
Mm.
And there were many people who reported that Todd was super violent towards other kids and towards animals from a very young
Don't
age,
love that.
as young as 15 months. Todd was in nursery school and he was already hitting other kids and destroying their artwork, and like was the clear aggressor in preschool.
That's very young.
Yeah, and I
Right?
think generally, like, kids hit each other, and
For sure.
like that's a
They
very
don't have control.
that's a very normal thing. Like, they're inherently very selfish, but I think there is a point where like some like behavior sticks out. And I
Yeah, there's
don't
a
think-
point where it's like exceptionally violent.
Yes, and I think even at a young age, like it's very tricky, and I think even ill-advised to start like being like, oh, this is going to be a violent kid. But it's when you look back at
Right.
somebody who you know is violent, and then you look back and say, oh yeah, they were pretty aggressive from a very young age, that you can kind of say that.
Mhm.
Now, there's 2 instances of animal abuse that people often talk about
fuck.
in regards to Todd. So for the next 30 or so seconds, I'm going to talk about an animal abuse very lightly, but apparently one time he shot a dog with a BB gun, and also he once used bleach to kill a goldfish.
Aw.
Now, later, Todd denies both of these things. He denies a lot of this stuff,
Yeah.
but
We don't believe you, bro.
denies a lot of shit. So I don't know. Sorry, I'm not good at sitting still. I don't know if anybody's.
Yeah, me too. It's so
You always
behind the
sit so
scenes.
still. You always.
Yeah, but
sit
I
in the
don't
same
like to
spot.
do it.
Okay, well, I just don't
And
do it.
I'm low key moving, like I'm moving the bottom half of my body.
Yeah, I really hard. I can't sit still. I can't sleep
Yeah.
still. I'm not good at it. But anyway,
I'm kind of the same way, but I'm just, doing my
Hey,
best.
Rouge.
Okay, hi, dog.
breathe harder in the
Hi.
microphone.
Is that her? Is she breathing into my?
Yeah.
You can hear the beautiful sound of my beautiful dog.
She's
She's
like
just bored.
She's like a hippo walking into the.
Oh gosh, my
frame.
bad. She we already recorded an episode before this, and I just have my dog keeping me company in my current virtual studio over here, and I think she's just she clearly just wants my attention. Mother, I'm here. Why am I not the center of attention? Okay, hang on. Go off my lap. If you are on YouTube, you will see her beautiful face.
Okay, so
Go on.
Todd's mother, Regina, she remembers him as being a very smart young boy. She says that he enjoyed reading the encyclopedia, but she did admit
Smart when he's not abusing animals.
that when he's not killing goldfish with bleach.
Yeah.
She said she did admit that when he got older, his behavior began to grow out of control, and that he was a very angry child.
That's so
And-
interesting. And it was like there wasn't necessarily violence in his household that we know of.
Well, there's a lot of conjecture because
Yeah.
I do believe that there must have been some violence. There was Todd claims later, and there's a lot of interrogation videos with him, and he claims that at one point I don't know if it was with his mother or without his mother, but was living on his grandfather's farm, and his grandfather, he says, was very physically abusive and would like poke him with a cattle prod, and like he claims it was like really bad abuse.
Yeah.
This is all unsubstantiated. But that's what he claims.
It's always hard to know when it's like the murderer.
Exactly. I think you take everything he says with a grain of salt. But again, later, and I'll talk about this later, like he does seem to often tell the truth, but
Interesting.
his version of the truth,
Right.
which does not always directly match reality. So
Yeah.
it's
And
again still hard.
It does sound like, I mean, for him to be so violent as a kid, like I would assume there's some cause to it, whether it is something social or something like a head injury, or I don't know what else would cause it.
And
But
I think you'll see too, the mother, in a way, I feel so bad for her, but I think that she completely enabled all of his behavior and like just
I mean, he was a child, like somebody dropped the ball, because no matter how bad you are as a kid, somebody else has to be responsible for you at that age.
And there is things like I was talking to a friend of mine who's a supply teacher, and like there's kids in, like, she's learned a lot about a lot of different like behavioral issues that kids have because she has to deal with them in the class or whatever. And like there's this new thing called, I don't know how new it is, but it's called like oppositional defiant disorder or whatever.
I know that.
And
I kind of think I have it.
It's no, you do not have it. It's basically
not actually,
like
but
a
in a
dick.
way.
It's just like when you're like a shitty kid and like you're just violent.
It's just when you what's the word? You rebel against authority for no reason and like excessively so.
Yeah, and it's like where does that come from? Like, is that a learned thing? I don't know.
I think everything is a combination.
Yeah, I think so. But
like, I think to an extent,
I think that low-key, like some personality traits are genetic.
I agree, but I also think that the environment you're raised in will kind of like solidify that behavior. So say he had been raised in a home with a mother who didn't enable him, there might have been at least
I just think on the other side of it too, and like this is very unsubstantiated, but like just judging based on her, is like I think if she maybe got a son with just like a naturally calmer disposition, she could have maybe raised a normal child. But like
it's a bit of both.
And like she's bouncing from marriage to marriage, and like the kid wants to be with the father, and I don't know what like tools and resources she had to like be able to learn how to deal with.
I mean, it's the 70s. They might not have had that much.
Yeah, it's just I kind of in a way feel for her because I feel like she's so delusional about her son. Like some of the shit she says later, it's just like.
So then I think it is her.
It is, but it's like
to an extent.
It is her, but it's like with Carla and Carl. It's like, would Carla have been a murderer without Paul? Like, would she have been that bad of a mother if she just had like a more chill kid? Like some kids just come out more chill, and like she's probably would have been like a really good mom to like a just like a chill Joe, but like she got a kid with like a little something loose and didn't know how to deal with it, and it's like fuck,
and just like unintentionally enabled the shit out of it.
Yeah, and maybe I think there's probably a lot of stuff that I don't know. Maybe she was more neglectful, and I don't know. Maybe I'm painting her as more of a victim, but I just see her now as an old lady like crying over her only son, and I just feel bad.
Right.
But anyway,
mom, so
I really have a lot more empathy for parents now, because it's like, God, you can do so little and screw up a kid so much. But also,
I think most of these people screw up a lot.
I think a lot of
them, not all of them, but
a lot of kids. I just think there's some examples of kids who like you could raise two kids in the exact same way, and one of them could turn out totally fucked, and one of them couldn't. Maybe, I don't know.
But a lot of the time, when kids turn out to be really fucked up, their parents for sure caused it.
Yes, I just feel bad because I think that a lot of parents, like, if you don't like love your kids, or if you don't give them emotional support or whatever, like that is a big mistake. I don't think that Todd's mother didn't love him. I don't think that I think
it sounds like she didn't know how to set boundaries with him, which is if you love
it's not
kid,
good.
It's toxic. It's really bad for the kid.
Yeah, but it's just not malicious, and it's not even
it's probably well intentioned, and probably as a result of her own like conditioning,
for sure. And like there's a lot, I'll get to the dad too, and there's a lot of he said she said situation,
as there tends to be.
So she said that his behavior became unmanageable to the point that she couldn't control him. And again, with like moms, especially single moms with sons, like
you've got a lot on your plate.
There comes a point when your child you can no longer like physically restrain your child. Your child is
Right.
bigger than you, and there's very little you can do if you did not set up the proper foundation to deal with your child.
Yep.
Like once you're just like a mom and you have like a 15-year-old boy who's 6'2", good luck trying to control him. Like
Right.
Chris says like, I remember the last time my mom tried to like hit me, and he's like, I realized like I could just hold her wrist and that was it.
Damn.
And yeah, that's like the mom and boy scenario, right?
Yeah, I think there's a huge shift in power that comes with that at a
And, like,
certain age.
I think we're lacking a lot of father figures here, so like that
Right.
is especially a not ideal in a boy
Yeah.
with aggression issues, right?
Yeah.
So Regina's new marriage did not last very long, unfortunately, and the couple split in 1982. And at that point, Todd was very adamant that he wanted to move back with his father, and he threatened to kill himself if his mother wouldn't let him go.
He was 15, you said?
1982, 71. No, he was 12. It was 11.
12.
11.
11. That's early. That's young.
Did I miss something here? Yeah, so Regina let Todd go back to his biological father in Arizona because he threatened to kill himself. And although it did seem like Todd was finally getting what he wanted, it did not take long for things to just go to complete shit. So I guess this is more Todd's version of events. Was that Todd began to work at his father's restaurant. His restaurant was called Billy's Famous for Ribs. And he would work there, I guess, like as a dishwasher or something. But he said that the relationship with his father quickly began to deteriorate. And Todd claimed that his father spent very little time with Todd and a lot of time with his many girlfriends. And that's when Todd's behavior started going bad. A neighbor of Todd's reported that Todd had once locked her son in a dog kennel and rolled it around and banged his head against the clay pipes. And while he was doing this, Todd was laughing as her son cried in fear and pain.
How old was that kid? Like Todd's age or younger?
I would assume Todd's age or probably younger.
Oh my God.
Now, very interestingly, I listened to an interview with Todd's father, and he denies all of that. He said that he and Todd started off very good, but he noticed that Todd had difficulty making friends because of his horrible personality. Like Todd was very selfish and very aggressive, and like he didn't know how to relate to other kids because he just wanted whatever he wanted out of it and wouldn't like, you know, a normal friendship where you're like, oh, like, what are you interested in? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like a back and forth. Todd didn't do that. So he said that like he tried to like kind of coach his son into like figuring out how to talk to people so that he could have friends. And that he tried to get into things that Todd was interested in, like model airplanes. And he really had a big interest in becoming a pilot. And he said that he was checking in with Todd's teachers to make sure that things were okay at school. And he says that he was with him every evening, either at home or at the restaurant, making sure he did his homework, and says that Todd is a liar and makes up a lot of stuff and he doesn't know why.
Okay.
And so
honestly, whenever parents are like, I don't know why the kid's lying, it's like probably something you're in denial about, parent.
Yeah, it doesn't, to me, just doesn't check out that like he was just a perfect father who like checked in and like was home with Todd every night, making sure he did his homework. Like that seems suspicious to me. I think maybe he wasn't like, I don't know if he was like as shitty as Todd says, but
right. But Todd was probably in a really fragile in the sense that like he's probably easily triggered at this point. So even his dad dropping the ball a little bit could have.
Yes,
been,
Todd,
you know,
Todd is like very easily enraged. Like when he was living with his mother
That's the vibe I get.
And stepfather, like he would do things like he would just like take his mom's stuff and destroy things. Like he would get really, really angry at his mom. Like there was this one time where she bought him all new furniture for his room. And because she wouldn't let him go to Arizona, he just like smashed and destroyed every piece of furniture. Like he was very destructive, aggressive, and like a scary person.
Yeah, like lost control kind of thing.
And I'm sure that he also was very frustrated because he couldn't relate to other kids. Like he had no friends because he did not know how to be a friend. And like that must contribute to frustration. And it's just this big cycle. And then on top of that, he has parents who are like, we just love you. Like the mom's just like, no, he like, until he's a good kid. And the dad's like, by Todd's account, is just like, all right, son, you live with me now. Like, I'm going to go out and meet Shirley at the bar. Like, and that's not helpful. There was a USA Today article that claims that Todd's favorite hobby was actually collecting weapons, whereas his father did not mention that. And Todd said that his father was a special forces soldier, mercenary, and an arms dealer, and that he had taught Todd how to make bombs. Another tidbit that his father left out. This is also unverified, but it seems that Todd was telling a lot of people this. It also claimed that Todd was abused, as I said, by the grandfather when he allegedly lived on the grandfather's farm. And Todd, now in life, blames his mother for the way that things turned out. And he says now that he has no love for his family.
Damn.
So all of that, him moving to his father's home and whatever, led Todd to finally commit a pretty awful crime at age 15, which would land him in prison. So on November 20, it's gonna be some rape here, so just heads up. On November 25th, 1986, Officer Betsy Cable was called to a home where a young boy reported that his 14-year-old sister had disappeared. She was babysitting the 14-year-old boy, the older sister, and then I guess he noticed that she was missing for a while, and so he called the police. And when Betsy was in the home gathering the boy's statement, the sister walked in through the back door looking super shaken, and she had a very horrible tale to tell. So the girl said that her classmate, 15-year-old Todd Kohlhepp, had knocked on her door and had lured her outside, and he got her to, like, he had a gun and he like forced her down.
That's so scary.
This alleyway nearby, and he put the gun to her head. And she claims that he was leading her towards his home, and that at one point she had the gun on her and she tried to grab it and he shot it, and it misfired. And if it hadn't misfired, she would have shot her in the face.
Fuck.
So Todd brought this girl back to his father's home, which was empty because he was out, as in his words, as usual. And he forced her inside into his bedroom, where he tied her up, he covered her mouth with duct tape, and he put a knife next to her, and then he raped her.
Dude, it's your classmate. Like, you think that's not going to come back to you?
Yes. And like, he's 15, I think she's 15 or 16.
It's so young.
So she says that she was able to finally convince him to let her go. I think they were starting to hear people in the neighborhood looking for her, and he started to freak out. And she was like, okay, just let me go. I'm going to tell them that I was just helping you look for a dog. And he's like, if you tell anyone, I'm going to kill your entire family. And she's like, okay, don't. Like, I will tell them that I was looking for a dog, but you have to let me go. And he agreed to this, I think, out of like stupidity and of being a 15-year-old boy. And, he just wanted to get things over with. And then she went home, and by the time she came like walking through her back door, I think she walked through her back door right before her parents got home, and their parents came and saw this whole thing. And at first she lied to them and was like, I was looking for a dog. And then it was very obvious that that's not what was happening. And finally she told them what happened. And like, her poor dad was like, did he like rape you? And she was like, yes. And she was 15. She'd like never had sex before in her life. And
right.
I watched this documentary series, and it was this journalist who kind of got to know Todd and was like speaking with him and kind of going through everything. And she actually found this girl years later, and then she like said her story, and like, so upsetting because like it's years later. This was, what did I say, 1986, and like this was must have been 2017, 18, 19 or whatever that this documentary series happened, and this woman like recounting what happened, she's still like crying. It's like
That's so sad.
probably the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to her. Imagine being raped, and imagine the first time you ever experience sex is when you're being raped. Like that's horrific, just horrible. And by like some random guy in your class who was probably like a weird guy in your class. And it seemed like Todd like wanted, like he like liked her, and this was his way of like getting with a girl
So
he liked.
up.
So you can see, I think, based on his childhood, like he's got something wrong with him where he just he can't relate with people. He does not understand people. And like his instincts are just, I want that, I'll take it.
Right.
Regardless of
it seems
what,
very immature, like very childlike.
regardless of like who this hurt. I don't like it does clearly have a lack of empathy for people.
Right.
And like it's very, to me, very similar to the Kayla Brown thing. It's like, okay, I want to have a woman to live with, because clearly if what Kayla says is true, that like he wanted to like live with her, he wanted her to get Stockholm syndrome so that they could live together, and he could just have like a willing partner, I guess, is like in his mind it's like a partner. In her mind it's like I'm a slave, I'm a hostage to you. But
for him, like that's how he feels comfortable, is like if he can keep the person oppressed.
Yes, because he can't like develop a relationship. He can't develop like he can't communicate with people.
He doesn't
like,
have those skills.
Foster a relationship. It's just I want you to do what I want. Do it. Which is just like creates a really terrifying individual.
Yeah.
So the girl, I'm not going to name her name. I don't think she needs that, but she ended up telling them what happened, and the officer, Betsy, who was there. And so then eventually multiple officers approached Todd's home, and he refused to open the door. But after a while, he was kind of coaxed out, and he opened the door a bit, and they realized he had a rifle in his hand. And when he finally answered the door, he had two questions. He said, "What's going to happen to me, and how much am I going to get?" And Betsy eventually was like, "Get the fuck out here," and like got him and arrested him, and like was able to overtake him. Clearly he was like, he had a gun, but he was not like well equipped. Like later in life, he becomes like very good with a gun. Then he was just like a 15-year-old with a gun, right?
Yeah. How did he get he loved weapons?
He claims that his father had a bunch of weapons. I think like this is South Carolina, or no, this is Arizona. Like it's pretty like culturally normal for families to just have a bunch of guns. It's kind of a foreign concept, I think, to us, but
we're Canadian.
Not there. But yeah, so before his trial, Todd was evaluated by a psychiatrist. And the evaluation noted that Todd appeared to show, quote, deep emotional disturbance, but not psychosis, end quote. And it was also noted that Todd, quote, displayed signs of ego inflation and extreme rebellion against authority. And in general, he felt that he should be in control, end quote.
Yeah. Oppositional defiance disorder.
Yeah. He just like had this, felt like he just deserved to control every situation. For no apparent reason.
But I agree, it doesn't sound like he's in a psychosis. Like he's aware of what he's doing. Yes.
And I think it's really rare to be in a psychosis. Like that's a very rare situation where you're literally like have no idea what's going on. Like it's
the only time
rarely the case.
Personally known about it, which is like this one girl that I can think of, she was on a lot of drugs before.
Yeah, or like the guy who climbed the bell tower and like started shooting people, like he had something wrong with his brain, like something took over, and that's apparently a famous case. I remember it from a long time ago. where they're like, why the fuck did he do this? And then it turned out like they did something and realized that I don't know if it was a head injury or something that like was affecting him, or a tumor maybe.
Yeah.
He was also known to have an above average IQ of 118 and was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder.
He's got something.
Interestingly, I've been looking into borderline personality disorder because my next case is like a very borderline, like a very severe case of borderline personality disorder. And it does seem like he's got some signs of borderline personality disorder, but I'm not sold on that diagnosis.
Yeah. I mean, it's a symptom-based diagnosis, so it's hard to say for sure.
But yeah, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And mind you, again, this is 1986, so I think psychology has come a long way since then.
Right.
Always, I think, something to note in like 60s, 70s, 80s cases where they're like diagnosing people. I'm always curious to know like if that diagnosis would hold out to today.
Right.
I don't know. Before the trial, a psychologist suggested that Todd needed, quote, confrontation over and over again regarding his aggressive behavior and needs to take responsibility for his aggressive behaviors, end quote. And they recommended a juvenile detention and placement in an aggressive offenders program.
Oh, fuck.
However,
those juvenile detentions are usually pretty rough.
Yes, but the program that they were suggesting was over capacity, which that sounds kind of problematic to me. But so a juvenile probation officer then recommended adult incarceration. And this person's feeling was that it was very unlikely that a 3-year program, presumably this young offenders program, would have been able to solve the problems of a person who's been showing signs of aggression since age 15 months. They're saying like, this is very ingrained. This is not somebody who's just gonna this is not going to go away. This is like way more of a problem than that, than like just like
a fair assessment, I'd say.
Yeah. And meanwhile, this is a juvenile probation officer. It's not a psychiatrist, but I'm assume that like a juvenile probation officer has seen a lot of kids with aggression issues.
Yeah. And he can tell she can tell when somebody's really standing out.
Yeah. So Todd was charged as an adult. He pled guilty to kidnapping in exchange for having the sexual assault charge dropped. Before he was sentenced, Todd's mother wrote to an adult probation officer begging for leniency. She blamed Todd's behavior on his father. She said,
there you go.
Yeah. So they both blame each other.
Yeah.
Although it's Todd who blames the mother.
Way to teach your child how to accept responsibility for their actions.
Well, and this is where her
enabling
is huge. And like,
yeah, I think there's really something to be said for that. Like a lot of parents do not teach their kids how to accept responsibility because they refuse to, and they always blame their kid for things. And probably their parents did that and blah blah blah. But Todd's still pretty much a child. He's 15, so somebody's got to accept responsibility.
Enabling, especially like aggressive behavior in your child, is like one of the worst things that you can do. I think
that's not love. Sorry, mom, not love.
I think tough love is like a very underrated form of loving your child. Especially I think looking at Todd's mom again, like she probably was just like, what the fuck do I do with this giant teenager of mine whom I can't control? And
it's all happening in a context. So for her too, she probably didn't have great relationships, I'm assuming, since she was in multiple marriages. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. I don't know. But maybe she didn't feel like she had anyone for backup or anybody that could help her. And that's where she felt super overwhelmed and was just like, I have this out of control kid that I just don't know what to do with.
And then also
was in that weaker position.
Yeah. And it's your only child who all you want to do is love. And like, that's the opposite of what they need.
Yeah. She probably was seeking affection too. And just in the wrong,
Yeah.
Anyways.
So anyways, So, yes, she wrote to the adult probation officer begging for leniency. She blamed Todd's behavior on his father, and she said that Todd put the father up on a pedestal and took everything that the father told him as truth. So she's blaming the dad and saying that the dad, like, I think she's kind of saying that the dad, like, not necessarily fostered the aggression, but like,
Yeah, but like maybe modeled violence a little bit.
Yeah, like he had like the with all the gun stuff. If that's
Yeah.
true, then he's like giving Todd weapons, knowing that this is already an aggressive child, and also
pretty
kind of
bad.
Yeah, and that like Todd like idolized his father, and so then finally when he went to go live with his father, and then his father kind of didn't really have much to do with him. That
didn't
like
live
that
up
was
to the expectation.
Yeah, and like that's not.
I think Todd probably felt really let down as a kid, whether it was fair or not. Like, it sounds like his emotional outbursts were really above and beyond what like is normal for a parent to deal with. But I'm sure he just desperately wanted some sense of order and control in the world, and his mom wasn't providing it. Then, you know, at school with the authority figures weren't providing it, and then his hope was his dad. His dad lets him down. Whether or not this is a realistic, like, I think it's a realistic desire for every child to want there to be a sense of order and control in the world. But maybe he wanted something that wasn't realistic. Like, maybe he would have needed like a perfect parent because he was so easily triggered.
I think that he would have needed decent parents with extra help, like with like mental health guidance. Like he would have been a kid that like if I had that kid, I'd be like, okay, this is out of my control. I'm gonna have to go see what kind of mental health professional can help me and figure out what the hell's going on here. And like maybe if they had been able to get intervention early on, then things would have been fine. But I don't know.
And maybe they created the behavior purely through enabling it. We don't know.
Yeah, but it's just I don't know what sort of mental health
what was available
facilities was available in South Carolina in 1986.
Yeah.
I don't suppose there was much of it.
Right.
So so Todd was charged as an adult as an adult. No, I said that part. She made the very unconvincing argument to this probation officer that Todd was not as dangerous as he seemed. She said,
okay,
listen to this. This is where you're going to like be like, the mother is a piece of shit. She said, quote, "They don't even stop to think that he even walked the girl home. Does that sound like a dangerous criminal? He walked the girl home." End quote.
Yeah.
After he raped her.
And that is why he has issues.
Yes. That is the enablement right there. She wrote this down, read it over, folded it up, and gave it to an authority picture. Yeah. Like, that's just that. And that's where I'm like, okay, you're delusional. Like this.
Yeah. And you're normalizing rape and violence. And you're probably a huge piece of the puzzle of why his behavior's been that way.
Yeah, I just could not.
It has to be. It has to be. Like, I don't believe, like, I think that, like, maybe obviously a feral human that isn't socialized at all isn't going to know how to behave. But if you are a human who has been socialized, that socialization is going to be maybe not obviously the only factor in your behavior, but to me, it's a massive piece of the puzzle. Yes.
So Todd was sentenced to 15 years without the possibility of parole.
Okay.
In the beginning, I think I'll say it now, but he was like, when he was going to be released, he had to be put on the sex offenders registry and like as a level 3.
That was when he was the level 3. Okay.
Most likely to offend. In the beginning of his sentence, Todd got into a lot of trouble. And in his first 3 years, he was cited for 7 violations, including fighting, striking a person, and destroying property. And then, and then later he got some non-violent infractions, including stealing and being absent.
Okay.
But after age 20, there were no records of Todd acting out.
Interesting.
He had a few jobs, like working in the cafeteria. He did some landscaping and general maintenance. And near the end of his sentence, Todd got a degree in computer science, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that's good.
He spent 14 years behind bars, and he was released in November of 2001. And he was put on the sex offenders registry. He went to live in South Carolina with his mother, and Todd's mother did everything she could to set up things for him so that he could have a good chance of getting his life in order.
Oh, that's nice.
My speculation is that when Todd was in prison, and like that, the reason why you see him acting out and then behaving like a model prisoner is that he learned a very important lesson that I think many career criminals and serial killers learn in order to be successful. And that is that in order to get away with anything, you must appear to be a normal person, and you must even appear to kind of be a nice guy. And I think like it's very similar with, remember in the Israel Keys case when he's like, oh, he learned one day that like his sadistic thoughts and like the things that he thought were funny, like those are not normal and those are not thoughts that other people have. And he's like, oh, I need to pretend that I'm normal if I want to live my life the way I am. So I think that's where Todd learned how and why he needed to behave like a normal person, and that like the way that he was is not normal, and that needed to be suppressed in order.
Yeah, I think so, because probably the whole time he was around his mom and then his dad, he wasn't getting like that type of consistent role model, so he didn't know how to behave.
And I don't think he was being properly like punished when he like did terrible things, at least not with his mom. Like when he like just destroyed things entirely, like eventually
bought him ice cream.
Yeah, and eventually she like gave up and was like, okay, you can have what you want. You're saying that you're going to kill yourself. Okay, you can have what you want. It's like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
So whatever, I think, anger, hatred, or resentment that he felt for other people, he decided to tuck that away and learn how to live in a civilized society.
Above average IQ coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when Todd got out of prison, he began working as a graphic designer at a company called Seven Sons & Co., which was a sports apparel company. Todd's LinkedIn profile said that he earned a bachelor's degree in computer science from 1998 to 2001, and that he graduated at the top of his class at Central Arizona College.
There you go.
Lies. His profile also, he was in prison at that time.
Oh, my bad.
He did get a degree, but and like I think it might be true that it was through the Central Arizona College,
but he wasn't attending the college.
No. And like top of your class at Arizona College versus like if it's even true, top of your class at like a prison class, probably very different things.
Yeah.
His profile also said that from January 1991 to September 2001, Todd was working for Arizona Consumer Industries as a graphic designer with emphasis on print media, vinyl, graphics, and engraving. In actuality, according to the Arizona Corrections website, Kohlhepp was working for Arizona Correctional Industries, which was a prison program that gave vocational training to inmates. So again, that's very different.
Yeah.
Todd worked at Seven & Sons until November 2003. In June 2006, Todd received his real estate license only 3 weeks after he applied for it. Now, in the application process, they asked about his criminal history, but he lied and said that, yes, he did go to prison in 1987, but he very seriously lied about the incident that put him there.
Can you just lie about that?
He did. Instead of admitting to the brutal kidnapping and rape of a 14-year-old girl, Todd said that his sentence resulted from a heated argument between himself and another teenager, implying that this dispute was between him and his girlfriend, a high school couple. And they never inquired further, and they never did a background check.
Oh my God.
And later they would get in trouble for this, but
do the fucking background check.
In his application, especially in a job where like you're going into people's homes. You're going one-on-one with people into their homes. Women, like you level 3 sex offender, most likely to reoffend. That's like, they're saying like stay away from this person.
Right.
So that's enraging.
That's insane.
In his application, Todd promised to, quote, set an example in performing in a manner following all guidelines honorably of your commission, end quote. And so that was just good enough for them. They're like, oh, cool guy. He went to prison? He says it wasn't that bad. Okay. He says he's going to honor the guidelines. Okay, cool. 3 weeks.
Seems legit.
Interestingly, there was one woman who did have a terrible experience buying a house from Todd.
Mm.
He was a home buyer, and she said that Todd did everything he could to make the experience horrible. He called her realtor a bitch and argued about every little thing and started talking about his motorcycles and his cars and his guns. And
oh my God.
She says that he started bragging to the mortgage dealer about how he'd shot people before. And this lady was like, this is so fucked. So she started doing some research on Todd, and she found out that he was a registered sex offender. So she called the authorities and she told them about his comments, about his weapons and killing people. And they said they couldn't do anything unless she had seen the weapons. So this woman called the county, and again, they were no help. In early 2015, she called the sex offenders registry and the sex offenders registry office in Spartanburg County. And they, again, didn't do anything, but she warned them. She said, this guy is up to no good. He has weapons. She said she thought something would happen, and nobody did anything about it. And it was
so annoying.
And it was later that year that Johnny and Megan went missing.
So shitty. Because it's like, I guess from their perspective, nothing's quite happened. So
the sex offenders registry, how did they not look him up and go, okay, level 3, most likely to offend?
But she wasn't calling, like, she was just like, oh, he was creepy and harassed me and he says he's killed people. But they're like,
she's saying that he says he has weapons and he says he's shot and killed people.
Right. That maybe that should be enough.
How do you not
like, oh, he's just talking shit.
How do you not be like, okay, you're on the registered sex offender registry. There's gotta be like you should be able to just call these people up and be like, hey, what's going on? We're getting some weird complaints. Like, not saying you need to arrest him, but like, how do you not even look into it? Because he's on the
registry, it should be.
And she's saying he's a registered sex offender. He's a realtor. Should they not go, how did he become a realtor? Right. He shouldn't be able to be a realtor. He's a level 3 registered sex offender.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. And like, maybe there is some reason that's fine and whatever, but I am struggling to see what that is.
Right. It's always so shitty when there's like somebody is trying to implicate somebody and she's trying people, like,
she tried so hard. She's called 3 different places. Like, this woman has done everything she can. She hasn't seen him hurt anybody, but she's like, something is not right. I can tell he's gonna hurt somebody. And she didn't have to go, like, she was done working with him. She didn't have to see him again. He was out of her life. But she cared that he would do something to somebody else.
Right. And it probably took a lot for her to.
And there's probably all these people being like, oh, some nosy lady, like, and it's like, that woman was 100% correct.
Yeah.
And like, fuck all you guys who are going to call her a Karen if anyone starts calling her a Karen, because she was absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think it's like important if you see something that you feel is not right. Like, there's definitely people who go out of their way to like accuse people of things and it's, not warranted or whatever. Like, you have to, I guess, know if you're a reasonable person or not. But like, it's important to speak out about if you're afraid that somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah. It just sucks that so often it seems like it's not taken seriously.
Yeah, in a lot of instances it's not. And it's hard to, and it's like, this woman was not like, I think a lot of the time they like ignore, like, we've seen cases where like it's like sex workers or like even people like Megan and Johnny, they kind of were like, none of their drifters or whatever. Like, this woman was just like a regular lady who's buying a home, like, not, so regular white woman, and they wouldn't even listen to her.
Right.
So I don't know. So that's where I'm going to leave part 1.
Okay.
So we've learned about we know the majority of his crimes. We know he's admitted to some of them. We know about his childhood and what led up to where he is now. But there's a lot more about what happened. There's some other people that are implicated. There's other crimes that he may or may not have done. There's just a lot more to the story and why he is the Amazon review killer. So
don't know about that yet.
Yeah, I'll get more into that later. But
and the bike shop too kind of seems a little bit of a loose end.
Yes, we will tie that up as much as it can be tied up.
Okay.
But there's a lot of also this is another case with a lot of interrogation footage. And it's where you kind of really get to see his really weird personality.
Yeah, he seems like quite the creep.
Yeah, and I think we've laid out a good foundation of like his kind of delusional worldview, which you'll get to see a little bit more when I do part 2.
I really want to know why he like twisted off people's feet.
That, and I'm sorry, you'll never know. I have no idea.
I just really want to know what the fuck is that?
There's a lot of little really annoying things where I think now, like, it's not a super spoiler, but he's like sitting in prison, and there's this documentary that I watched that, you know, this woman kind of really gets to know him, and he was like corresponding with her, and it's like he'll give, like, I think it's a very common thing, you know, you see with Israel Keys and with a lot of killers. It's like I said, they're not just going to give you all the cards because then nobody's going to talk to them anymore. And I think he likes talking to people because that's all he has to do. So it's hard to drag information out of him.
So annoying.
But it does.
I mean, he's still alive, it sounds like. So maybe we will find out someday.
Yeah, and he's only been locked away for a couple of years now. Like the
right, it was recent.
Stuff. It was 2016 when they found Kayla.
How old was he at that point? Like 40 something? 46?
He was 71. So
that's 46.
Now it's 2021.
Yeah.
So 50. He's 50 today.
And how old was Kayla? No, she was like young, right?
She was 30 at the time.
Wow, he's so creepy. And he has such a variety of fucked up things he does.
And the interesting thing, what I find most interesting about like all the crimes that we've talked about is like he doesn't have a type of like a one type of victim.
Right.
Like he's killing couples. He was like, if we're going with the motorcycle club or the motorbike thing, it was like he was upset, so he just killed all the people there.
Right.
Like it's just, they're not consistent crimes.
Yeah.
It seems like there's like crimes of rage, and then there's more thought out things, and he's twisting feet off.
Yeah. What is that?
I have no idea. I will look further and see if I can find anything more, but I've been looking into this case for a while and I have not been able to find out. First of all, he's still never admitted it. He will not admit that he twisted the feet off.
Just admit it.
But there's literally no other way that the feet could have been removed. Yeah. And it's so
and the
random.
fact that it happened to all three of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and feet, is that something that like you would keep as a trophy? Like why? What would be the purpose of that? And when were they removed? Were they removed before you killed them? I assume after, because it seems like you shot them.
I assume it. Yeah, it's because they all were like shot while they were like standing up, so it has to be after. But fucking why?
So fucked up. Yeah.
I'll do my best. I will do my very best to see what I can dig up. But even in that documentary, which is very recent, they're like, well, we have no idea why he did this. And they're like,
so fucked.
Literally talking to him.
I wish he'd just tell us.
Yeah, it would be nice. And maybe he will. He's got a long time. He's only like 50.
Yeah.
And he seems to talk a lot. So
okay.
If I ever find out later, like I'll let you all know.
You'll update.
Yeah. So that's all for now. We'll wait to rate till the end of it. And yeah, I'm very interested in this case. So I'm excited to do episode 2.
It's very interesting. It's definitely, I would say, pretty unusual. situation.
it's very chaotic and it's like very all over
Yeah.
the place.
That's the right word for it.
So we'll see. And I'm telling it in kind of a weird way. So maybe we'll see how the like order of events, if it like makes sense by the end of it. But yeah, so that's it for us for today. Please come back for part 2. I'll try to promise you that you won't be disappointed. Please talk to us on Instagram. Give us an email, hello@whosknockingpodcast.com. Our Instagram is Who's Knocking Podcast.
It is now very late.
Yeah,
it's 2 episodes.
It's late, so we're a little bit out of it. Excuse us. But yeah, reach out. Whatever. Thanks for watching or viewing or whatever. Check us out on YouTube if you want the visuals. And
to see my cute dog.
Yeah, to see Ruji
No.
stepping in.
Yeah.
Somebody last episode or one of the last episodes, somebody was actually somebody who've been emailing back and forth with. Shout out Dano.
Ben, right?
Yeah, was asking to see Rouge, so or a dog.
Yeah, you get to see her.
Yeah, but Hanna has like 10 dogs, so
yeah, I got a couple.
See a couple more.
I have a slightly unnecessary amount of dogs, but it's fine.
So we're fading, but just everybody remember to stay safe out there because you never know
who's knocking.
Goodbye. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew Cook.